Hi everyone, I'm Sanjay Raj from the Energy Shift Method. It's a mental wellness practice I started where I help my clients to shift their energy to shift their lives.
And my name is Preety from Another Perspective, and I help give you another perspective so that you can live a life of joy, ease, and so much more potential.
And this is
The Two Bunnies podcast. So today we're going to focus a little more about our first, well, not our first modality, but one of the main modalities that impacted our life called Theta Healing. And the reason why we're going to focus on this journey of ours is because of the subconscious programs or subconscious beliefs. So maybe we could start off by sharing what exactly are subconscious beliefs.
So subconscious beliefs are these kind of thoughts and that internal voice that we have inside us. Some of you might feel it as the voice that says, oh, I'm not good enough, or that's impossible. Or you might hear people, your own self feeling like, you want to really achieve something, but I don't think I'm worthy enough. So all those are those subconscious beliefs that sort of plague your mind to block you from the kind of life you actually want to live.
Yeah, and what's super cool or not cool about these subconscious beliefs is, first of all, 98% of these beliefs don't even belong to us. We've picked them up either from our society, our environment, from teachers, from parents, and cultural as well. And what's good about it is that we can always choose to reprogram these beliefs.
Absolutely. And the thing about the subconscious is like what Preety mentioned, right? That 98% are just not yours. It was all learned,
Yeah.
And the thing about this 98%, it's also a big 90 over percent that determines the way we behave, the way we think,
The way we react.
The way we react.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like that thing in your mind that's controlling everything.
It's kind of like an autopilot mode.
Absolutely.
Right? So the way I see it is a lot of us tend to react and not respond. And the reason why we react the way we react is because of these programs or these learned patterns that have been stored in our subconscious mind. Kind of like an AI program, if
Absolutely.
you may say. So why we're touching upon this and why it's so impactful and powerful is actually there's been a lot of science and research done around this area. So maybe I'm going to leave this to Jay because he's a lot better explaining this part.
So we keep talking about the subconscious mind, and we were wondering, like, where did it even start? Like, how did our subconscious mind get programmed? So interestingly, children between the ages of 0 to 7 are predominantly in a theta brainwave state. And if you're wondering what the theta brainwave state is, our mind, our brain, right, actually goes through a whole bunch of brainwave states from alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta. Alpha is also like when we're having a very relaxed kind of conversation. Delta is when we're in a very deep sleep. Now, theta is that brainwave where you're in that state where you're just before sleeping. Just when you're about to fall asleep, you don't know if you're dreaming or not dreaming,
Yeah.
awake, not awake. That's the theta brainwave
It's
state.
also like a very meditative state for those of you who
Absolutely.
do meditate. Yeah.
And the thing about children is before the age of 7, predominantly, they're in this theta brainwave state, which is the gateway to the subconscious. So they're like these sponges. Everything they observe, everything they see, they're learning and they're forming programs. And that's where it all starts.
Yeah, so just to touch upon a little there, when Jay said it's a gateway to your subconscious mind, it's also interesting to see that kids at that age don't really judge. There isn't any judgment between right and wrong, good and bad. It's like more towards cause and effect. So for example, if a kid goes to school and they voice out an opinion of theirs, or they speak in class and their teacher is like, oh my God, be quiet. Kid A might form a belief or perspective that says, oh my God, if I talk, I will be scolded. Kid B might have a perspective of, oh my God, if I speak up, I will disrespect a teacher, right? Or another potential cause and effect is if, for example, anyone grew up in a household where, someone is abusive or physical towards the other partner, and the reaction after that is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, but I love you. Then what the kid or what the person tends to see it as is love equals to pain or love equals to abuse. And so it's not really about right and wrong, good and bad, but it's just a cause and effect kind
Absolutely.
of programming that happens in this state.
Yeah, and just like the AI you mentioned, right? It's
Yeah.
the input equals to the output program, which is what governs then the autopilot in how we react, in the world.
Yeah.
So how I mean, you're going to tell the audience, right? Like,
Yeah.
where did we first understand the subconscious mind and
Yeah.
how we could actually dive into our own subconscious mind? The first time was in
Absolutely.
Theta Healing. That was the
Yeah,
modality.
Theta Healing came to our lives about 9 years ago. We kind of learned about the subconscious mind a lot more during our bachelor degrees in psychology, and we obviously knew like the work of Carl Jung, who talks a lot about the ego and the subconscious mind, and so we were familiar with it, but it all sounded really good in theory. Until we had our first very session in Theta Healing. So the reason I particularly went in, sorry, I think I touched my mic. Anyway, the first time I went for my session, so this was post us getting married, and I realized that when I used to be very frustrated with a certain topic, my immediate reaction was to yell, right? And this was, of course, not healthy or normal for our relationship. But no matter how much I tried to be calm, or no matter how much I tried to kind of speak in a polite way, my instant reflex and trigger was to raise my voice and yell. So Anand back then had told us, there's this new modality, Theta Healing. It's kind of like psychology, but a lot more deep. You should try, go for it. And at that point of time, I think Jay and I had so many issues in our relationship that it was heading towards calling it quits. And I was, to be honest, very desperate. And I was like, you know what? Worst case, like, this is a complete waste of the session. Best case, I learned something new. So I booked in my first session with my mentor back then, and she kind of asked me these very basic questions in my perspective that made me roll my eyes. I'm not gonna lie, because it felt like, oh my God, like, what is this, right? So she had asked me a question that was along the lines of, so when you are yelling, what do you feel? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, no, just tell me what you feel. And I was like, oh, well, when I yell, to be fair, I feel more heard and I feel more powerful. And she's like, huh, that's interesting. And she said, play with me here. When was the first time you kind of had this belief where the more power the more you raise your voice, the more heard you are? And at this point, again, I'm rolling my eyes. I'm not taking this seriously. But it's really strange because at that moment, this really bizarre memory popped up. And it was a memory of me being a 4-year-old girl and me trying to tell my mom, like, Mom. And she didn't hear me. And I was like, ooh, why am I getting emotional?
It's coming back up.
Sorry, guys. Whew, don't know where that came from. So going back, I was trying to tell her, Mom, and she didn't listen to me. And so out of maybe frustration, I was like, Ma. And then she turned and she looked at me. And it was really strange to see how that moment of impact made me understand that, oh, in order to be heard, I need to raise my voice. So that was the beginning and the start of me to understand a little more about myself, a little more about why I was the way I was, a little more about having control over these subconscious beliefs that I once formed as a 4-year-old girl that I had no idea existed. And what was great about Theta Healing in that particular session was because I had the awareness of what that belief was, I was then able to change and reprogram it into a new belief, right? So back then, my healer therapist mentor, she said, Preety, would you like to now understand what it feels like to be heard without having to raise your voice? And that's when the theta reprogramming happens. And it's strange because maybe some of you thinking are going like, how is it that in one session and having that awareness, it changes your life, right? But the way I see it is two things. From that moment on, I had a little more clarity about who I am and why I was the way I was. And because of that awareness, every time I did raise my voice, I understood what I truly wanted, which was to be heard. And then I was able to take a step back and communicate that a little more effectively. And third was, strangely, I wasn't yelling as often. Of course, I still do. And I think we're all human in those moments, but it wasn't as often in our relationship, at least.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there was definitely like improvement. It wasn't like
Yeah.
100% every situation that same program that she was
Yeah.
reenacting again and again. So it's definitely something that shifted.
yeah, which was Super cool.
Yeah, and some of y'all are wondering like, how is it that Preety suddenly remembered these moments, and that's that magic of the theta brainwave state, right? So a theta healer, this practitioner, as practitioners we actually train to tap into the theta brainwave state, not just for ourselves but for the client as well. And in that conversation, all those memories start to come up.
Yeah, and I think because I was so blown away with that session, like Jay mentioned, we're both trained practitioners now because we knew there was this whole world beneath us, above us, wherever you want to put it, that we still needed to explore, and it got us curious enough to kind of start doing the work.
Yeah.
In that sense, with regards to our subconscious mind, because we slowly then started to realize how this just not impacts us and our emotions, but it impacts our relationships with our parents, with each other, with finance, with career, with the kind of lifestyle that you want. And yeah, that became our journey 9 years ago with the subconscious mind.
Absolutely. And you can imagine, right, like if that's one memory that was so potent that changed the whole behavior.
Yeah, the fact that I still felt it just now, strangely.
Yeah, so that memory is really, really potent, right?
Yeah.
And you can imagine along the way, across all those years, all the other memories we dug up and, like resolved and shifted out. And when all that happens, like big changes happen in your life. And for me, right,
Yeah.
I think one of the big thing was, grew up in Singapore, in the Singapore education system. So it was instilled within me this attitude of, hard work, the grind, always pushing, always like pushing past your boundaries, almost the point of like sacrificing a lot of aspects about myself just for success, and that just became part of my programming. So, in school, I mean, it's fine, right, to have that really hard work, because what else are you doing as a kid, right? Just study and get good grades, right? But what we don't really understand sometimes is how that shapes you later on in a career. So when I started my career, I was the guy who was really just working hard, like hard work. And when I say hard work, it doesn't feel good all the time. I'd be the one like coming into the office on weekends and, working extra.
Really long hours from what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. The struggle was real, but I realized that I was actually honoring the struggle. So when I did the theta session, right, I started to realize I had this pattern where struggle and hard work is the key to success. And that was my program, which means that every time I was going after something successful, what tagged along behind me was struggle and hard work. And I was making these micro behaviors because that was my programming. So I wanted to change that because, that really leads to burnout after a while. You're just not a happy person.
Yeah.
And, when you're not a happy person at work, you bring that home as well and it just snowballs. So I learned a lot of new programmings and new beliefs where maybe the key to success became working smart, being creative, innovating, efficiency. So when I started absorbing all those new programs, being rewired with those programs, things started to change for me. Things I used to take like a whole week or 2 weeks to accomplish, I was doing it in less than a week, 2-3 days, and I was like, oh my God, like I was surprising myself. I felt, wow, I had this brilliant idea and I never would have thought of using that idea because I was more leaning towards the hard work, the hours equals to success, right? So when I started reprogramming, I was getting things done faster. I was just much happier as a person. And I started to see success come much easier.
Yeah.
I wasn't sacrificing time. I was actually spending more time outside, having a good life, and focusing on myself. And at the same time, being efficient and just very dedicated when I was, when I set time aside for work.
Yeah.
So that was crazy how just changing the programs changed the whole way I worked and also my mental health, and I really prevented burnout from that.
Yeah, and I again, as a witness to this change, right? It was sometimes you kind of think like, how is it that one session does all of this? Like, this is too good to be true. Like, this won't last. This will come back, And I think that's what we both love about Theta Healing is because all of these sessions are done in the theta brain state, it does last, right? Again, I'm not saying it is 100 out of 100, but it does push you at least to a 7 out of 8, a 7 out of 10 kind of level where it does change your life with utmost ease because that becomes your new autopilot, right? So it's done with a lot more you are still conscious, right? You are still putting in the effort, but like I think Jay said, everything just comes a lot more easier
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah, and when we say things come easier, yeah, maybe you get, some people might think, oh, in just magical ways, things just align. But also, you need to understand that in this work that we do, it's very psychological as well. Once you change those patterns,
Yeah.
those micro behaviors, the way you think, the way you're just more open to new ideas coming in, new ways of doing things, you're just more receptive. And when you're more receptive, then you start to get all those epiphanies, all those like, oh my God, there's a better way of doing it. Like all those
Yeah.
realizations just start coming to mind. And it just changes the game.
Yeah, and like the way we see it is, again, right, your points of view create your reality. So if you have a point of view like Jay had, where in order to honor my work, respect my work, I have to work hard for it, then there's very little room for you to kind of think of ways to be better or ways to be more efficient and effective, because that's your point of view. But the minute you decide to have a new point of view of, you know what, I can work smart, I can work in another way, and there is another way, then you start getting more creative with that outlook, and suddenly you have better ideas or how to execute in a different way.
Absolutely. And I think one more thing that's coming to mind is, speaking of like the relationship,
Yeah.
I had a lot of beliefs, right, about what it meant to be a man, be a husband. And, at this one point of time after we got married, I was literally emotionally just shutting down, right? I was shutting down to her. I was just shutting down in general, right, to people, but mainly to her. And that was because, again, not conscious, right, but subconsciously when I did the work, I realized that I had subconscious beliefs around what being a man was, which means that as a man, as a husband, I now had to shoulder the burden of the whole family. I had to take it all
Yeah.
on myself, which means that if I felt down, if I felt like, something wasn't right, if I felt just a bit just uneasy, I shouldn't be putting all that burden onto my wife. And by doing so, I was just shutting down as a person, right?
Yeah.
But again, that's just a point of view. It's a belief system that maybe I picked up from, I guess maybe it's an Asian society
I
thing,
think so.
maybe, I don't know. But growing up, yeah, I did see a lot of men who were just, I'm the man of the family, this is me, and
This is my problem to solve.
my problem to solve.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be airing my problems out to the women in the I don't know, right? But on the whole, I sort of absorbed some of those belief systems either by observation. No one told me that was how to be a man.
Yeah.
It was just by observation, by just being in certain like circles of people. I sort of became that person as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, just totally didn't realize that. But once I changed all that, I realized that I could be a husband, be a man, be responsible, and at the same time still share my
Absolutely.
feelings with my wife. And actually, she wasn't shouldering the burden. She didn't feel like it was being
No.
burdened. It was like,
It actually made me feel a lot more loved and cared for, because it felt like a
Exactly.
partner, right? At
like
the
a
end of
friend,
the
like
day.
because
Yeah.
that's how we were as friends.
Yeah.
Right, and I sort of took that away after after we got married. So, yeah, doing the work really helped me, because then we started to get back to being friends.
Yeah.
I felt okay with sharing my feelings, sharing how I felt. I think it's just the vulnerability aspect. I think as men, sometimes we've been made to criminalize vulnerability. It's not a manly thing to do. But once you wipe out all those beliefs, things just get a lot more lighter and easier, and yeah, relationships improve.
Yeah. So I think what we're trying to say here is emotions will come and go, right? As you clearly saw, I did have a wave of emotions, but I think through the tools that we've learned, it's helped us not drag on these emotions for too long,
Yeah.
right? Because I think you get a sense of, again, security and awareness as to who you are, why these are coming up, right?
Yeah.
And it's just about riding through them. And so emotions then last for a few seconds, right? Instead of days, weeks, and months, and
Yeah.
then you get into that yucky, stucky feeling. So I think like the work we do with our clients is to first empower them to feel not the same way we do, but hopefully allow them to have the awareness about why they are the way they are, but also to continue to not judge all these emotions. I think a lot of the times when I worked with certain, therapists or healers, it was all about being positive and staying positive and, maybe that works, right? I don't know. But for me, I think, and what's worked well for Jay and I, it's to acknowledge these heavy or not so nice emotions, understand where they're coming from, and then choose to feel a different way through various tools and techniques.
Absolutely. And the two things I always tell my clients is number one, they're blind spots, right? Because
Yeah.
they're tucked in the subconscious mind. They're blind spots, and you don't know why you are the way you are,
Yeah.
right? And the answer lies in your subconscious. And the second thing I always tell clients is, you being the way you are, it is not your fault.
Yeah.
Right? You were like an AI program. You were programmed to be this way unknowingly, and now you're on autopilot, and you're just thinking, "Oh, am I wrong? Did I?" Like, it's not your fault. You've been programmed that way. So
Yeah.
always realize that if there's something you want to change in terms of your behavior, the way you feel, how you come across in a relationship, career, the key lies in your subconscious. You find that programming, you shift it out, things start to shift.
Absolutely. And I think we'll definitely touch upon this on our next episode that focuses on more towards creation and shifting and manifestation, because
Yeah.
we've actually gotten a few questions around there. So thank you for being with us on this journey, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.